The conference room fell silent as my father's words hung in the air like a death sentence. I'm turning over the entire Caldwell empire to Aaron, effective immediately. My hands gripped the leather armrest of my chair, knuckles white, as 50 executives stared at me with a mixture of pity and discomfort. This was supposed to be a celebration of our company's success. Instead, it became my public execution. Aaron sat across from me, trying to hide his smirk behind a coffee cup. My younger brother, who had joined the company 5 years ago after flunking out of 2 business ventures I had bailed him out of. The same brother who still called me for help understanding quarterly reports. My father continued talking about succession planning and fresh perspectives, but his words sounded like static in my ears. I felt my chest tighten as 15 years of 18-hour days, missed holidays, and sacrificed relationships flashed before me. Every client I had landed, every crisis I had solved, every innovation I had implemented, all of it now belonged to someone who couldn't tell a balance sheet from a grocery list. The presentations I had prepared for this meeting sat untouched in my leather portfolio, suddenly meaningless. My father wouldn't meet my eyes as he detailed Aaron's new role. Board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some had worked with me since I was 20 years old, fresh out of college with nothing but determination and my father's reluctant permission to prove myself. They had watched me transform his regional construction company into a national empire worth over $600 million. I stood up slowly, smoothing my suit jacket with trembling hands. Every eye in the room followed my movement. My father finally looked at me, his expression unreadable behind his reading glasses. I wanted to scream, to flip the conference table, to demand an explanation. Instead, I picked up my portfolio and walked toward the door. "Mia," my father called out. I paused but didn't turn around. I have nothing to say that's appropriate for this setting. Then I walked out, letting the heavy door close behind me with a soft click that somehow felt louder than any slam. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel for more interesting revenge stories. My name is Mia Caldwell, and I just lost everything I spent 15 years building. I'm 35 years old, and until 20 minutes ago, I was the executive vice president and operational backbone of Caldwell Industries. Now I'm apparently nothing. I made it to my office before the tears came. Not sad tears, furious ones. The kind that burned hot and left my vision blurred as I stared at the framed photos on my wall. Me at 20, shaking hands with our first major client. Me at 25, accepting an Industry Innovation Award. Me at 30, standing beside my father as we broke ground on our largest project to date. In every photo, I looked proud, hopeful, naive. My assistant knocked softly before entering. "Miss Caldwell, I'm so sorry." Nobody knew he was going to. "It's fine, Marcus." I turned away from the window, wiping my eyes. "Can you bring me the files on the Henderson project? And the Riverside development plans?" He hesitated. "Your father's office just called. They're requesting all project files be transferred to Aaron's team by end of day." The words hit like a physical blow. They weren't just taking my title, they were erasing me completely. "I see. Then just bring me my personal items. The photos, my diplomas, anything that's mine." After Marcus left, I sat in my chair and thought about how I got here. My father, Richard Caldwell, had started this company 40 years ago with 1 truck and a crew of 5. By the time I graduated college with degrees in business and engineering, he had built a respectable regional operation. But he had bigger dreams, and I was hungry to prove myself. I had thrown myself into the business with everything I had. While my college friends were backpacking through Europe or starting their careers in comfortable 9-to-5 jobs, I was on construction sites at dawn, in client meetings until midnight, learning every aspect of the business from the ground up. My father called my cell phone as I was packing my diplomas. I let it ring 4 times before answering. "What do you want?" My voice came out colder than I intended, but I didn't apologize. "Mia, we need to talk about this rationally. Come back to my office." "Rationally?" I laughed, a harsh sound that didn't sound like me. "You just handed my life's work to Aaron in front of the entire executive team without warning. There's nothing rational about any of this." He sighed, that familiar disappointed sound that used to make me work harder, stay later, try more. You're being dramatic. This is about what's best for the company's future. Aaron can barely run a department meeting without my notes. How's he best for anything? I zipped up the box containing my personal items with more force than necessary. Did you even consider discussing this with me first? Or was public humiliation part of the plan? I'm still your father, Mia. Watch your tone. Something inside me snapped. You were my father. But the man I called Dad wouldn't have done this to me. He wouldn't have dismissed 15 years of loyalty and dedication without a conversation. He wouldn't have chosen incompetence over competence just because it wore pants. The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought he'd hung up. When he finally spoke, his voice was tight with anger. I built this company from nothing. I decide who runs it. You've had opportunities other women in this industry could only dream of because of me. Show some gratitude. Gratitude. The word tasted bitter. I showed gratitude by sacrificing my 20s and early 30s to make your dreams bigger than you ever imagined. I showed gratitude by landing the Henderson account when everyone said it was impossible. I showed gratitude by turning your regional construction company into a national empire worth over $500 million. And I'm grateful for your contributions, he said, his tone softening slightly. But Aaron needs this opportunity. He struggled to find his path. This will give him purpose. So my purpose was to build something for you to give to your son? The realization hit me like cold water. That's all I ever was to you. A placeholder until Aaron was ready. Don't be ridiculous. I'm done with this conversation. I picked up my box and headed for the door. Email me about my final paycheck and severance. Have your lawyers contact mine about my stock options and partnership agreements. Mia, if you walk away now. I hung up before he could finish the threat. Whatever he was about to say didn't matter anymore. The man I had idolized, worked myself to exhaustion for, believed in, that man was gone. Or maybe he had never existed at all. The next morning, I woke up in my apartment with nowhere to go. For the first time in 15 years, I didn't have meetings scheduled, projects to oversee, or problems to solve. The emptiness felt suffocating. I made coffee and sat on my balcony, watching the city wake up below me and let myself feel the full weight of what had happened. My phone buzzed constantly with messages. Some were from colleagues expressing shock and sympathy. Others were from former classmates who had seen the company announcement about Aaron's new role. A few were from reporters asking for comments about the leadership transition at Caldwell Industries. I ignored them all except one. Lunch? Today? I'm buying. The text was from Malcolm Torres, a former mentor who had moved on from Caldwell Industries 5 years ago to start his own investment firm. I hadn't spoken to him in months, but his timing felt like fate. We met at a quiet Italian restaurant downtown. Malcolm was in his 50s, with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He waited until after we ordered before speaking. I heard what happened. Richard's an idiot. He's my father, I said automatically, then caught myself. Was my father. I don't know what he is now. He's a man who just made the biggest mistake of his career. Malcolm leaned forward. Mia, I've been in this industry for 30 years. I've watched you work. You're brilliant, strategic, and you understand both the business side and the technical side better than anyone I've ever met. What your father did was not only wrong, it was stupid. The validation felt like oxygen after drowning. Thank you. But validation doesn't pay my bills or give me back what I lost. No, but capital and opportunity do. He pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. I've been looking for someone to partner with on a new venture. Someone with your skills, your industry knowledge, and your drive. Someone who understands high-stakes construction and development, but can also innovate. I opened the folder and scanned the first page. It was a business proposal for a new construction and development firm focusing on sustainable urban projects. The initial investment numbers made my eyes widen. Malcolm, this is ambitious? Risky? Exactly what you need. He smiled. I have the capital. You have the expertise and the reputation. Well, you have a reputation for excellence, and shortly everyone will know you have the guts to walk away from nepotism and build something better. I spent the weekend reviewing Malcolm's proposal and making lists. Not revenge lists, strategy lists. If I was going to do this, I needed to be smart about it. I needed to be better than Aaron, better than my father, better than everyone who had underestimated me because I was Richard Caldwell's daughter instead of his son. Malcolm's investment firm would provide the initial capital, $30 million to start. That was enough to secure office space, hire a core team, and begin pursuing contracts. But money alone wouldn't build a company that could compete with Caldwell Industries. I needed something else. I opened my laptop and started making another list. Every contact I had made in 15 years, every client relationship I had built, every industry connection that existed because of me, not because of my father's name. The list grew longer than I expected. Contractors who trusted my judgment. Architects who valued my input. City planners who had worked with me on zoning issues. Investors who had funded projects because I pitched them. My father had taught me one valuable lesson, even if he didn't mean to. In business, relationships matter more than anything. People work with people they trust. For 15 years, I had been the person they trusted at Caldwell Industries. Aaron was just a name on an org chart to most of them. By Sunday night, I had a preliminary business plan. Torres Caldwell Development Group. Malcolm liked the name when I called him. Strong. Professional. Makes it clear this isn't some startup run by angry kids in a garage. When do we announce? I asked. When you're ready. But Mia, you need to understand something. Your father will see this as a betrayal. Aaron will see it as an attack. They'll fight back. Good. The word came out harder than I intended. Let them fight. I've been fighting my whole life to prove I deserve to be in that building. Now I'll fight to prove I didn't need it at all. On Monday morning, I signed the partnership agreement with Malcolm. We scheduled our first official meeting for Wednesday to begin recruiting key personnel. I felt something I hadn't felt since walking out of that conference room, purpose. My father called that afternoon. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. What? I heard you're starting a competing firm. That's unacceptable, Mia. You fired me, Dad. What did you think I was going to do? Retire at 35? I didn't fire you. I restructured. You gave everything I built to Aaron without discussion, without warning, without even the courtesy of a private conversation first. You humiliated me publicly. So yes, I'm starting my own firm. And yes, it will compete with Caldwell Industries. That's how business works. His voice turned icy. You signed a non-compete agreement. I smiled even though he couldn't see it. No, I signed a non-compete agreement that prevents me from working for direct competitors for 18 months. I'm not working for anyone. I'm building something new. My lawyers already reviewed it. I'm clear. The silence on his end told me he hadn't expected that. You'll fail. You don't have the experience to run a company on your own. I ran yours for the last 5 years while Aaron learned which fork to use at business dinners. I'll manage. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking, but I felt more alive than I had in months. Torres Caldwell Development officially launched 6 weeks later. We held a press conference at our new downtown office space, a modern building with glass walls and sustainable design features. I wore my best suit and practiced my speech 100 times until it felt natural instead of rehearsed. Malcolm introduced me to the gathered reporters and industry professionals. Mia Caldwell is one of the most innovative minds in construction and development today. Her work on sustainable urban projects has set industry standards. We're honored to partner with her on this new venture that will focus on environmentally responsible development without sacrificing profitability. When I stepped up to speak, I saw several familiar faces in the crowd. Former Caldwell Industries employees, industry contacts, and in the back, partially hidden behind a column, Aaron. He wasn't smiling anymore. Thank you all for coming, I began. Torres Caldwell Development represents a new approach to urban construction. We believe that sustainable, community-focused development isn't just good ethics, it's good business. Our first project will be announced next month, and I promise you it will set a new standard for what's possible when innovation meets responsibility. The questions came fast. Is this in response to being passed over at Caldwell Industries? Will you be competing directly with your father's company? How does your family feel about this venture? I answered each one carefully, professionally, never letting them see the anger that still burned underneath. My departure from Caldwell Industries was a mutual recognition that I needed room to grow beyond the role available there. As for competition, the construction industry is large enough for multiple successful firms. We plan to succeed on our merits, not by tearing down others. After the press conference, Malcolm pulled me aside. Well done. Professional, confident, and you didn't take the bait when they tried to make it personal. It is personal, I admitted. But they don't need to know that. That evening, I got a text from Aaron. Nice speech. Dad's furious. I didn't respond. Let him be furious. Let them both stew in the consequences of their choices. 3 days later, I landed our first major client. The West Side Revitalization Project had been on every developer's radar for months. The city was planning to transform a struggling neighborhood into a mixed-use development with affordable housing, retail space, and green areas. It was exactly the kind of project Torres Caldwell was built for, and exactly the kind of project Caldwell Industries had been pursuing. I scheduled a meeting with the city planning committee and spent 2 weeks preparing a presentation that would blow away any competition. Malcolm secured preliminary backing from environmental investment groups. We brought in architects who specialized in sustainable design. By the time we walked into that meeting, we had a proposal that was both innovative and practical. The committee chair was a woman named Patricia Hughes, who I'd worked with 3 years earlier on a different project. She remembered me. Ms. Caldwell, I was surprised to see your firm's name on the proposal list. I thought you were with Caldwell Industries. I was. Now I'm building something new. Something better. I pulled up our first slide. What if I told you we could deliver this project under budget, ahead of schedule, and with a 30% smaller carbon footprint than any proposal you've seen so far? For the next hour, I walked them through every detail. Cost breakdowns. Timeline projections, environmental impact studies, community benefit analyses. I answered every question without hesitation because I had lived and breathed this proposal for 2 weeks straight. When we finished, Patricia smiled. I'll be honest, your father's company submitted a proposal too. It's more conservative, more traditional, less risky, and less innovative, I added. The city hired consultants who said this neighborhood needs bold change, not careful modification. Our proposal delivers that change while still maintaining fiscal responsibility. 2 weeks later, we won the contract. The announcement made industry headlines. New firm beats established players for major city project. I framed the article and hung it in my office, right next to my empty space where a photo of my father and me used to hang. My father called 3 times that day. I didn't answer. What could he say that would matter now? Aaron showed up at my office unannounced on a Thursday afternoon. Marcus tried to stop him, but my brother pushed past and barged into my office like he owned the place. Old habits die hard. You're stealing our contracts, he said without preamble. I didn't look up from my computer. I'm winning contracts through superior proposals and competitive bidding. That's not stealing. That's business. The West Side project was ours. Dad had relationships with half that committee. Had. Past tense. I finally met his eyes. I built most of those relationships, Aaron. I worked with Patricia Hughes on the Riverside development 3 years ago. I consulted with Michael Chin on environmental impact assessments 5 times. They know me. They trust me. You're just a name they recognize because it's on a building. His face reddened. You're doing this to hurt Dad. To hurt me. I'm doing this to build something successful. If that hurts you, maybe ask yourself why. I stood up and walked to my office window, looking out at the city below. You know what the sad part is? If Dad had talked to me, if he'd explained his reasoning or offered me a real role in the transition, I might have stayed. I might have helped you learn the business properly. Instead, he humiliated me publicly and expected me to just take it. He gave me a chance. He gave you my job, my clients, my projects, my 15 years of work. I turned back to face him. And you know what? I'm grateful. Because now I'm not building his legacy, I'm building mine. Aaron stood there for a moment, looking lost. For a second, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then he said, "You'll fail. You always needed Dad's name to open doors. Get out of my office." My voice came out deadly calm. And Aaron? Next time you want to see me, make an appointment like everyone else. After he left, Marcus poked his head in. You okay? Better than okay, I said, returning to my desk. Pull up the Johnson commercial proposal. I want to review it before tomorrow's meeting. The Johnson commercial account was another major win, a $15 million office complex downtown. We beat out 4 other firms, including Caldwell Industries. The pattern was becoming clear. When clients compared our proposals directly against my father's company, we won. Our designs were more innovative. Our costs were more competitive. Our timelines were more aggressive. Most importantly, I was more trusted. Industry veterans who had worked with me for years knew what I could deliver. Aaron was still proving himself, and he wasn't doing a great job of it. Malcolm and I celebrated the Johnson win at the same Italian restaurant where he'd first pitched the partnership. You're doing it, he said, raising his glass. Building something real. Something successful. We're doing it, I corrected. Your investment and guidance made this possible. My money made it possible. Your talent made it successful. There's a difference. He set down his glass and grew more serious. Have you heard the rumors about Caldwell Industries? I shook my head. I'd been deliberately avoiding industry gossip about my father's company, focusing instead on building mine. Aaron's struggling. He lost the Morrison account last week, a project they'd been cultivating for 6 months. Word is he misread the client's needs and pitched the wrong solutions. The project manager who'd been handling it quit right after. Rumor says she's looking for new opportunities. I thought about that. Victoria Santos had been with Caldwell Industries for 8 years. She was brilliant at client relations and project coordination. Is she looking at us? She hasn't reached out yet, but I have her number if you want to make a call. I did. The next day, I invited Victoria to lunch. She was a tall woman in her 40s with sharp business sense and a no-nonsense attitude I'd always respected. We met at a cafe near her apartment. I'll be direct, I said after we ordered. Malcolm told me you left Caldwell Industries. I'm wondering if you'd consider joining Torres Caldwell. She smiled. I was hoping you'd call. Working under Aaron has been challenging. He doesn't listen to advice. He makes decisions based on ego instead of strategy. And he's burning through the goodwill you built with clients over the years. What happened with the Morrison account? Victoria shook her head. Aaron decided he knew better than the entire team. Morrison wanted innovative, sustainable design. Aaron pitched them traditional construction with minor green elements because he thought sustainable was just a trend. They walked out of the meeting. Victoria joined Torres Caldwell as our Director of Client Relations, and she brought something invaluable with her: detailed knowledge of every ongoing project and potential opportunity at Caldwell Industries. Not trade secrets or confidential information, but market intelligence about which clients were happy, which were frustrated, and which were looking for alternatives. The Henderson project is struggling, she told me during our first strategy meeting. They're 3 weeks behind schedule and Aaron keeps making expensive changes without consulting the client. Henderson's getting frustrated. Henderson Construction had been one of my first major wins at Caldwell Industries 10 years ago. I'd maintained that relationship carefully over the years. What kind of changes? Cosmetic stuff mostly. Aaron wants the project to look more impressive than what was originally designed. But Henderson doesn't care about impressive, they care about functional and on budget. Classic disconnect between what the client needs and what Aaron wants to deliver. I thought about that carefully. If someone were to reach out to Henderson and remind them that other firms could potentially take over mid-project if things got too problematic. That someone would need to be careful not to appear to be poaching, Malcolm warned. We've been winning on merit. Let's not get dirty. He was right. But there was nothing wrong with making sure existing relationships knew I was available if they needed help. I sent a polite email to Dennis Henderson, the company's founder, congratulating him on the project and mentioning that I'd heard it was progressing well. I kept it friendly, professional, nothing that could be construed as solicitation. Dennis called me 2 days later. Mia, I'm glad you reached out. I need to talk to you about something. Off the record. We met for coffee. Dennis was a gruff man in his 60s who valued straight talk and reliable delivery. I'm not happy with how things are going, he said bluntly. Aaron's not you. He doesn't understand our needs. He's making changes without asking us first. And when we complain, he tells us to trust him. That's frustrating, I said carefully. I want to know if there's a way to bring you back onto this project. I don't care who's on the letterhead. I care about someone who listens and delivers. I thought about it carefully. Technically, we could potentially submit a proposal to take over project management, but it would require Caldwell Industries agreeing to step aside. That's unlikely. What if I made it a condition of continuing the contract? What if I told them either you manage it or we terminate? Then you'd probably be dealing with lawyers and delays while they fought it. I shook my head. Dennis, I appreciate your confidence in me, but I don't want to win business by creating legal messes. That's not how we operate. He respected that answer. I could see it in his face. All right. But when this project wraps up, if it wraps up without killing me first, I want Torres Caldwell bidding on our next 3 projects. Exclusive initial bidding before we go to open proposals. That was worth more than taking over one troubled project. You have my word. 3 months into Torres Caldwell's existence, we had 5 major contracts, 15 employees, and a reputation for delivering ahead of schedule and under budget. Industry publications were starting to notice. The new force in urban development read one headline. Another called me the developer who's rewriting the rules. My father's company, meanwhile, was quietly struggling. Aaron had lost 3 more major bids. 2 senior project managers had left for competitors. The Henderson project was still behind schedule and over budget. Industry insiders were starting to ask questions about Caldwell Industries' future direction. I tried not to feel satisfaction about their struggles. I tried to focus on my own success instead of their failures. But late at night, when I couldn't sleep, I'd lie awake thinking about how different things could have been if my father had just talked to me first. If he'd offered me a partnership instead of a dismissal. If he'd valued my contributions instead of seeing me as a placeholder for his son. Marcus knocked on my office door one afternoon with an unusual look on his face. Miss Caldwell, your father is here. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's urgent. My first instinct was to send him away. Make him feel what I felt when he dismissed 15 years of my life in one conference room announcement. But curiosity won. Send him in. Richard Caldwell looked older than I remembered. More tired. He walked into my office and stopped, looking around at the modern space, the city views, the framed articles about our recent successes. Nice office, he said finally. Thank you. What do you want? I didn't offer him a seat. He sat anyway. I want to talk about this situation. About where we go from here. There's no situation, Dad. I have a company. You have a company. We both operate in the same industry. That's it. You're stealing my clients. My employees. You're deliberately targeting everything I built. I laughed, sharp and bitter. I'm competing. That's what you taught me to do. Compete and win. Or did you only mean that applied when I was winning for you? Mia, please. Can we talk about this like adults? We could have talked about it like adults before you gave my job to Aaron. We could have talked about it before you humiliated me in front of 50 people. We could have talked about it before you dismissed 15 years of my life like it meant nothing. I stood up. But you chose not to have that conversation. So we're having this one instead. He looked down at his hands. For the first time in my life, my father looked uncertain. I made a mistake, he said quietly. The words hung in the air between us. I waited for him to continue. I thought Aaron needed the opportunity more than you needed the recognition. I thought you were strong enough to handle it, and he wasn't. I was wrong. You weren't wrong, I said. You were cruel. There's a difference. My father left without getting what he came for, reconciliation, peace, maybe my agreement to stop competing so aggressively. I gave him none of it. After he was gone, I sat at my desk for a long time, thinking about his admission that he'd made a mistake. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated. Part of me just felt empty. Malcolm found me still sitting there an hour later. I heard your father visited. You okay? He apologized. Sort of. Said he made a mistake giving everything to Aaron. What did you say? That he wasn't wrong, he was cruel. Because that's the truth. I turned to look at Malcolm. You know what the worst part is? Part of me wants to forgive him. Part of me wants to go back to how things were before. But I can't. That door's closed. Good, Malcolm said firmly. Because going back would mean accepting that what he did was acceptable. It wasn't. You deserved better then, and you deserve better now. He was right. I knew he was right. But knowing something intellectually and accepting it emotionally are different things. I went home that night and cried for the first time since starting Torres Caldwell. Not angry tears, sad ones. Grieving for the relationship with my father that I'd lost, and for the naive woman I'd been who thought hard work and loyalty were enough. The next morning, I woke up with renewed determination. Grief could wait. Success was the best revenge, and I still had work to do. Victoria came into my office with news that changed everything. Mia, I need to tell you something. It's about the Riverside development. Riverside was a massive mixed-use project worth over $80 million. Caldwell Industries had been pursuing it for 2 years, long before I left. It was supposed to be their flagship project, the kind of development that would cement Aaron's legitimacy as a leader. What about it? They're opening up the bidding process. Again. Word is the initial designs from Caldwell Industries didn't meet the city's updated sustainability requirements. They're giving other firms a chance to submit new proposals. I sat back in my chair, mind racing. Riverside was huge. It was also exactly the kind of project I'd specialized in during my years at Caldwell Industries, large-scale, complex, with challenging sustainability requirements. When's the deadline? 6 weeks. It's aggressive, but doable for a firm that knows what they're doing. Put together a team. I want our best people on this. Architects, engineers, environmental consultants, everyone. This isn't just another contract. This is the contract that proves we're not just successful, we're dominant. We worked 18-hour days for 6 weeks straight. I personally reviewed every aspect of the proposal 3 times. Malcolm brought in additional environmental consultants and sustainable design experts. Victoria coordinated with city planners to ensure we understood every requirement. The proposal we submitted was the most comprehensive, innovative, and ambitious thing Torres Caldwell had ever produced. 2 weeks after submission, the City Planning Committee invited us to present. Caldwell Industries would present the same day. It would be a direct, public comparison between my work and Aaron's. Between the company I'd built in 6 months and the company my father had built over 40 years. The morning of the presentation, I dressed in my best suit and practiced my speech one more time. Malcolm met me outside the city planning office. Remember, he said, you're not competing against your father or Aaron. You're competing for the opportunity to do great work. Focus on that. I know, I said. But we both knew it was more than that. Caldwell Industries presented first. Aaron walked through their proposal with obvious nervousness, reading from notes and stumbling over technical specifications. The design was adequate but uninspired. The sustainability features were minimal, meeting requirements, but not exceeding them. The timeline was conservative, adding buffer time that made the project longer than necessary. Then it was our turn. I walked to the front of the room and plugged in my laptop. Good morning. I'm going to show you how Torres Caldwell can deliver the Riverside Development Project not just on time and on budget, but as a model for urban development nationwide. For the next hour, I presented with the confidence that came from knowing I was right. I walked them through innovative design features that reduced environmental impact while increasing usable space. I showed them how smart material choices and construction sequencing could cut both time and cost. I explained how community integration could turn this from just another development into a neighborhood asset. When I finished, the committee chair said, Ms. Caldwell, this is impressive. But your timeline is aggressive. Can you really deliver this in 18 months? We can, I said firmly. Because we've done similar projects before. Because our team has the experience and expertise to handle complex coordination. And because unlike some firms, we build contingency planning into our schedules from day one instead of adding buffer time and hoping for the best. It was a direct shot at Aaron's presentation, and everyone in the room knew it. 3 weeks later, we won the Riverside contract. The announcement made headlines not just in local business publications, but in national industry journals. Upstart firm defeats industry veterans for major urban project. The win validated everything we'd built. It proved Torres Caldwell wasn't just successful by accident. We were genuinely better. My phone exploded with calls and messages. Clients wanting to discuss new projects. Reporters wanting interviews. Industry professionals wanting to congratulate me or pick my brain about our proposal strategy. I answered what I could and delegated the rest to Victoria and our growing communications team. The call I didn't get was from my father or Aaron. Their silence spoke louder than any message could have. Malcolm took me to dinner that night at an upscale steakhouse downtown. "You did it," he said, raising his glass. 6 months ago, you walked out of Caldwell Industries with nothing but your expertise and your determination. Today, you beat them for the biggest contract in the region. You should be proud. "I am," I said. And I was. But mixed with the pride was something else, a hollowness where family used to be. I'd won professionally, but the cost was every relationship I'd valued outside of work. As if reading my mind, Malcolm said, "Your father made his choice. He chose Aaron over you. That wasn't your fault. You didn't cause this rift. You just refused to pretend it didn't exist." "I know. It still hurts." "Good. That means you're human. The day it stops hurting is the day you should worry." 2 days later, Aaron called me. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won again. "What do you want?" "We need to talk. About Riverside. About everything." "There's nothing to talk about. I won fair and square." "I know." His voice was quiet, defeated. "That's what I want to talk about. I'm in over my head, Mia. I don't know what I'm doing. The Henderson project is a disaster. We just lost the Garrett account. Dad won't listen to my concerns because admitting I'm struggling means admitting he made a mistake choosing me. For the first time since this started, I heard genuine honesty in my brother's voice. Not arrogance or defensiveness, just truth. "What do you want from me, Aaron?" "Help. Advice." "I don't know. Something." I thought about it for a long moment. The right thing to do would be to help him. He was my brother, regardless of what had happened. But helping him meant helping my father's company. It meant potentially undermining my own success. "I can't help you," I said finally. "I'm sorry, but I can't. You and Dad made your choice when he gave you my job. Now you have to live with it." I hung up before he could respond. It was the right decision professionally, but it felt wrong personally. Lines were getting blurred, and I didn't like it. 8 months after leaving Caldwell Industries, Torres Caldwell Development had 23 employees, 9 major contracts, and annual revenue projections that would hit $40 million by year's end. We'd moved to a larger office space with room to grow. Industry publications were calling us the fastest-growing development firm in the region. Everything I'd worked for was coming true, but on my terms this time. Then Victoria came into my office with information that changed everything. "Mia, I need to show you something. It's about Caldwell Industries' financial records. Public filings only, nothing illegal, but the numbers tell an interesting story." She spread documents across my desk. Quarterly reports, project accounting summaries, investor disclosures. As I scanned through them, a pattern emerged that made my stomach tighten. "They're bleeding money," I said quietly. "More than that. Look at the Henderson project costs. They're absorbing massive overruns. The Morrison project they lost? They'd already spent $2 million on development costs with no way to recoup it. Aaron's leadership is costing them millions in lost opportunities and failed execution." I studied the numbers more carefully. Caldwell Industries wasn't just struggling, they were in serious financial trouble. Within 6 months, maybe a year, they'd be forced to sell assets or take on debt just to maintain operations. The empire my father had built, that I'd helped grow, was crumbling under Aaron's incompetent leadership. "What are you thinking?" Victoria asked carefully. "I'm thinking my father built something worth saving, even if he didn't value my role in building it." I closed the folders and looked at her. "Start analyzing their assets. I want to know which projects are salvageable, which clients might be willing to switch firms, and what their company would be worth if they needed to sell." Victoria's eyes widened. "You're thinking about acquiring them?" "I'm thinking about options. My father gave away my inheritance to prove some point about Aaron's potential. Maybe it's time I took back what should have been mine all along, but on my terms this time." Malcolm was less enthusiastic when I explained my thinking. Mia, acquiring a struggling competitor is risky, especially when that competitor is family. The emotional complications alone could be a nightmare. I'm not talking about a bailout or a rescue. I'm talking about a strategic acquisition of valuable assets. Caldwell Industries has 40 years of client relationships, experienced personnel who are stuck with bad leadership, and ongoing projects that could be profitable under competent management. Strip away the family drama, and it's actually a smart business move. He studied me carefully. Is that really all this is? Smart business? Or is this about proving something to your father? I thought about that honestly. Both. I won't lie and say emotions aren't involved. But the business case stands on its own. We're positioned to grow aggressively. Acquiring their assets and client base could accelerate our timeline by years. The fact that it also proves my father was wrong about who should run his company, that's just a bonus. I spent the next 2 months building a comprehensive acquisition strategy. Malcolm brought in financial analysts and business attorneys. We studied every aspect of Caldwell Industries operations, identifying which parts had value and which were liabilities. The picture that emerged was both sad and predictable. Under my leadership, Caldwell Industries had been profitable and growing. Under Aaron's leadership for less than a year, they were losing money quarterly. Major clients were leaving. Employee turnover was climbing. Industry reputation was suffering. My father had built something strong enough to survive short-term mismanagement, but not strong enough to survive Aaron indefinitely. The acquisition proposal I developed was straightforward. Torres Caldwell would purchase Caldwell Industries' major contracts, client relationships, and key personnel. We'd assume their profitable ongoing projects and let them keep the disasters Aaron had created. We'd pay fair market value based on actual worth, not sentiment. And we'd do it all publicly, so everyone in the industry would see exactly what happened when competence replaced nepotism. Before presenting the offer, I did something I probably shouldn't have done. I called Aaron. I'm sending you a business proposal tomorrow. You should review it carefully before Dad sees it. What kind of proposal? His voice was wary. The kind that acknowledges reality. Your company is failing, Aaron. Not because the construction industry is hard, but because you're not qualified to run it. My proposal gives you both an exit that saves some dignity and prevents total collapse. You want to buy us out? He sounded shocked and angry. You want to take everything Dad built? I want to acquire the valuable parts of a failing business before they collapse completely. There's a difference. Read the proposal. Talk to your lawyers and accountants. Look at your own numbers honestly. Then make a decision based on reality instead of pride. I hung up before he could argue further. The proposal went out the next day via formal business channels, with copies to their board of directors, major investors, and legal counsel. It was professional, detailed, and completely public. No chance for my father to bury this quietly or spin the narrative to save face. The response came faster than I expected. 2 days later, my father called. You're trying to destroy everything I built. No, Aaron already did that. I'm trying to salvage what's left before it's completely worthless. Read the proposal, Dad. Look at your own financial situation honestly. You have maybe 6 months before you're forced to take on crippling debt or sell assets for pennies on the dollar to whoever wants them. My offer is fair market value with terms that protect your employees and ongoing client relationships. This is revenge. You're punishing me for choosing Aaron. This is business. If you'd chosen competence over nepotism, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But you made your choice, and now you're dealing with consequences. The only question is whether you deal with them on reasonable terms with someone who actually cares about preserving your legacy, or whether you wait until you're desperate and get picked apart by strangers. The silence on his end lasted so long I thought he'd hung up. Finally, he said, I need time to consider this. You have 72 hours. After that, the offer expires and I start approaching your clients individually about transferring their contracts. Your choice. 48 hours later, I got a call from my father's attorney requesting a meeting. Malcolm and I arrived at their law offices downtown, where my father, Aaron, and 3 lawyers waited in a conference room. The atmosphere was tense and formal. The lead attorney, a woman named Catherine Pierce, began. Ms. Caldwell, Mr. Torres, we've reviewed your acquisition proposal. My clients have some concerns about the terms and structure. For the next 2 hours, we negotiated. They wanted more money. We countered with detailed financial analysis showing their company was worth less than our initial offer based on current performance. They wanted guaranteed retention of all employees. We agreed to keep key personnel, but not deadweight. They wanted Aaron to maintain a leadership role. We flat out refused. This is non-negotiable, I said firmly. Aaron has proven he's not qualified to run operations at this level. If he wants a project management role with appropriate supervision, we can discuss that. But he's not getting an executive position in my company based on his last name. My father's face reddened. You're humiliating him. You're humiliating both of us. No, I'm running a business. You humiliated me by giving him a job he couldn't handle. I'm just refusing to repeat your mistake. I leaned forward. Look at the numbers, Dad. Really look at them. Every metric that mattered when I ran operations has gotten worse under Aaron's leadership. Client satisfaction down. Project completion rates down. Profit margins down. Employee retention down. These aren't opinions, they're facts. Aaron spoke for the first time. You don't understand the challenges I've faced. The industry conditions, the economy. The industry conditions are better now than they were 2 years ago, Victoria interrupted, sliding a report across the table. Economic indicators are up. Construction spending is up. The only thing that's down is Caldwell Industries' performance, and that correlates directly with your leadership. The truth hung in the air like smoke. No one could dispute the numbers because numbers don't lie. After another hour of discussion, we reached an agreement in principle. Torres Caldwell would acquire Caldwell Industries' core assets for $32 million. Key employees would be offered positions in our firm. Ongoing profitable projects would be assumed by us. Aaron would have no leadership role, though he could apply for project management positions like anyone else. My father would retain the Caldwell Industries name and building, but without the business operations that had made them valuable. I need to discuss this with my family, my father said quietly. He looked older than I'd ever seen him, tired and defeated. You have 24 hours, Malcolm said. After that, market conditions may require us to adjust our offer downward. As we left the building, Malcolm asked, how do you feel? Like I'm about to take everything my father valued and make it mine on my terms. I took a deep breath. Honestly? Satisfied. Maybe that makes me petty, but I've earned the right to feel satisfied about this. My father accepted the acquisition terms the next evening. The announcement went public the following week, and the industry response was immediate and overwhelming. Headlines screamed variations of "Daughter acquires father's failing empire" and "Torres Caldwell rescues Caldwell Industries from collapse." Industry analysts called it a brilliant strategic move. Some called it cold revenge. I called it justice. The integration process took 3 months. We absorbed Caldwell Industries' client relationships, their best employees, and their profitable ongoing projects. We let them keep the disasters Aaron had created and the overhead they couldn't afford. Within weeks, our revenue projections jumped to $75 million annually. We went from 23 employees to 47. Our office space expanded again. More importantly, the clients who had worked with me for years at Caldwell Industries were thrilled to be working with me again. Thank God you're back, Dennis Henderson told me. Aaron nearly killed our project. You saved it with 2 months to spare. Aaron quietly disappeared from the industry. Last I heard, he'd taken a position with a real estate firm in another state, far from the wreckage of his failed leadership. I didn't feel bad about that. He'd been given an opportunity he didn't earn and couldn't handle. The consequences were his to bear. My father was different. He called me a month after the acquisition closed. Can we meet? Just to talk. We met at a coffee shop, neutral ground away from offices and lawyers. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. I owe you an apology, he said without preamble. A real one this time. I made a terrible mistake choosing Aaron over you. I made it worse by refusing to admit that mistake until it was too late. You deserved better from me. Better as my business partner, better as my daughter. I'm sorry. I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity. I found only regret. Why? I asked. Why did you choose him over me? Was it really just because he's your son and I'm your daughter? He was quiet for a long moment. I think I convinced myself Aaron needed the opportunity more because he'd struggled more. You were always so capable, so driven. You didn't need my help. But Aaron, he needed me to believe in him. I thought giving him the company would give him purpose, help him become the man I wanted him to be. Instead, you gave him something he couldn't handle and took away the person who could have taught him how to handle it. You hurt us both. I know. And I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to hear me say it. I thought about that. Forgiveness was complicated. He destroyed our relationship, humiliated me publicly, and nearly destroyed his own company through stubborn pride. But he was still my father. Somewhere under the mistakes and bad decisions was the man who'd taught me to love this business, who'd given me my first opportunity to prove myself. I don't forgive you, I said honestly. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I don't hate you anymore either. That's the best I can offer right now. He nodded slowly. That's more than I deserve. Thank you for that much. 1 year after walking out of Caldwell Industries, Torres Caldwell Development was the fastest growing firm in the region. 2 years after, we were one of the most respected firms in the industry. 3 years after, we'd expanded into 3 states and had annual revenue exceeding $120 million. The West Side Revitalization Project finished 6 months ahead of schedule and won national awards for sustainable urban development. The Riverside development became a model for mixed-use construction nationwide. The Henderson project that Aaron had nearly destroyed was completed under budget and led to 5 more contracts with Henderson Construction. I hired talented people and gave them room to grow. I built client relationships based on trust and delivery. I innovated constantly, pushing the industry toward more sustainable and community-focused development. Everything my father had taught me about business, I applied. Everything he'd done wrong in leadership, I avoided. Malcolm retired from active management but remained on our board of advisors. Victoria became our chief operating officer. We added a chief financial officer, a head of sustainable design, and a director of community engagement. The company grew beyond just me, becoming something larger and more resilient. My personal life improved too. I started dating someone I met at an industry conference, an architect named Marcus who understood long hours and big ambitions because he shared them. I took vacations for the first time in years. I learned that success didn't require sacrificing everything else I valued. My relationship with my father slowly, carefully began to heal. It would never be what it was before, too much had broken for complete repair. But we had coffee occasionally. He asked about my projects with genuine interest. I asked about his retirement plans. Small steps toward something that looked like family, even if it felt different than before. Aaron and I hadn't spoken since the acquisition. I wasn't sure we ever would again, and I was okay with that. Some relationships can't survive the weight of what happened. Some bridges, once burned, are better left as ashes. Industry peers asked me sometimes how I'd achieved such rapid success. My answer was always the same. I was ready before the opportunity came. When my moment arrived, I didn't have to prepare, I just had to execute. What I didn't usually add was that my moment came from betrayal, from being underestimated and dismissed. I'd built an empire from anger and determination, from refusing to accept that my value was less than my brother's just because of gender and birth order. The best revenge truly was success, but the better outcome was discovering that I didn't need revenge at all. I just needed to be free to build something extraordinary. For years after the acquisition, I stood in front of a crowd at an industry awards ceremony, accepting recognition as Developer of the Year. In my acceptance speech, I thanked Malcolm for believing in me when I had nothing but expertise and determination. I thanked Victoria and my entire team for their dedication. I thanked the clients who'd trusted my vision. I didn't thank my father. Some people in the audience probably noticed that omission. Let them wonder. After the ceremony, reporters surrounded me asking the questions they always asked. How does it feel to surpass your father's company? Do you feel vindicated? What advice would you give young women in male-dominated industries? I answered diplomatically, professionally, giving them sound bites about hard work and perseverance. The real answers were more complicated. Yes, I felt vindicated. Yes, I'd proven that giving Aaron my job was the worst business decision my father ever made. Yes, there was satisfaction in knowing I'd built something better than what I'd lost. But I'd also learned something unexpected in the process. Building out of anger was effective, but it was exhausting. The real joy came from building out of passion, from creating something that mattered beyond just proving people wrong. Torres Caldwell's success was sweeter because we were doing meaningful work, not just because we'd beaten the competition. That night, Marcus and I celebrated at our apartment. "How does it feel?" he asked, pouring champagne. "Being officially recognized as the best in your field?" "Good," I admitted. "Really good. But you know what feels better? Knowing I would have done this work even without the award. This recognition is validation, not motivation." He smiled. "That's the difference between you and Aaron. He needed validation to function. You just needed opportunity." Later, lying awake while Marcus slept beside me, I thought about the conference room where this all started. The moment my father announced he was giving everything to Aaron. The shock and betrayal I'd felt. The anger that had fueled my first months building Torres Caldwell. If I could go back to that moment, would I change it? Would I want my father to choose differently, to recognize my value and give me what I'd earned? Part of me said yes, that version would have hurt less, preserved relationships, avoided years of family tension. But another part of me recognized that being dismissed was the greatest gift my father ever gave me, even if he didn't intend it that way. It forced me to build something that was entirely mine. Not my father's legacy extended through me, but my own creation from the ground up. Torres Caldwell Development existed because I'd been betrayed, but it thrived because I'd been freed. 5 years after leaving Caldwell Industries, I did something I never expected. I hired my father as a consultant. Not out of pity or obligation, but because he genuinely had valuable experience to offer. He'd spent 40 years in construction and development. He understood client relationships, industry dynamics, and long-term strategic thinking. His failure was choosing Aaron over competence, not lacking expertise himself. The conversation where I made the offer was awkward. "I don't expect charity from you," he said stiffly when I explained what I was proposing. "It's not charity. It's utilization of available resources. You have knowledge and connections that could benefit our expansion into the Southeast region. I'm offering you a contractor position, paid hourly, with specific project assignments. You'd report to Victoria and work within established guidelines. No special treatment, no executive authority. You want me to work for you. I want you to work with us on projects where your expertise adds value. If that's too much for your ego, say so now and we'll both move on." He thought about it for a long moment. "What would the industry say? Your father working for his daughter's company after you acquired his. The industry would say I'm smart enough to use every resource available to succeed. Your choice, Dad. But decide quickly, I'm meeting with other consultants tomorrow." He took the position. The first few months were tense and awkward. He struggled with not being in charge, with having to justify his recommendations instead of simply issuing directives. But gradually, he adapted. He was good at client relationships and mentoring younger team members. He understood the construction side of development in ways that complemented my business and strategic focus. We'd never be as close as we were before his betrayal. That relationship was gone, and no amount of time would resurrect it. But we found something new. A professional respect built on actual contribution rather than assumed family loyalty. It was smaller than what we'd lost, but it was real. Aaron never came back. He'd found success in his new career, managing smaller real estate projects in a different market. We exchanged Christmas cards every year but never spoke. I didn't hate him anymore. Honestly, I barely thought about him. He'd become irrelevant to my story, just a footnote about obstacles overcome. The real measure of success came in unexpected ways. Young women started reaching out, asking for advice about navigating male-dominated industries. Business schools invited me to speak about strategic planning and competitive positioning. Industry organizations asked me to serve on boards and committees shaping the future of urban development. I said yes to most of those requests because representation mattered. Every time a young woman saw someone who looked like her succeeding in construction and development, It expanded her sense of what was possible. Every time I shared my story, it normalized the idea that competence matters more than gender or family connections. But I was careful about how I told my story. I didn't want to be known only as the daughter who took revenge on her father's company. That was part of my journey, but not the defining part. The defining part was what I built, the innovations I introduced, the standards I set for sustainable and community-focused development. Taurus Caldwell's real legacy wasn't beating Caldwell Industries, it was changing how the industry thought about urban development. We proved that sustainable construction could be profitable. We demonstrated that community engagement improved projects instead of complicating them. We showed that innovation beat tradition when it came to meeting modern challenges. 6 years after starting the company, we completed our largest project yet, a mixed-use development in Atlanta worth $200 million. It combined affordable housing, commercial space, green areas, and community facilities in ways that revitalized an entire neighborhood. The project won national awards and attracted attention from cities across the country wanting similar transformations. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, the mayor of Atlanta mentioned me specifically. Mia Caldwell didn't just build a development, she built a model for how cities can grow responsibly and inclusively. This project will improve lives for decades to come. That recognition meant more than any revenge against my father ever could. I'd proven I was more than just someone reacting to betrayal, I was someone creating positive change. The anger that fueled my first year had transformed into purpose that sustained me long-term. Malcolm pulled me aside after the ceremony. "You did it," he said quietly. "Not just building a successful company, but building something that matters. I'm proud of you." "We did it," I corrected. "Your investment and guidance made this possible. My money helped. Your vision made it real. There's a difference." He smiled. "What's next?" "You've beaten your father's company, revolutionized your industry, and achieved recognition as one of the top developers in the country. Where do you go from here?" I thought about that. Forward. There are still cities that need better development. Still communities that deserve investment. Still innovations waiting to be discovered. The revenge part of this story ended years ago. The building part never ends. 7 years after walking out of that conference room, I received an unexpected call. My father's voice was shaky, uncertain. "Mia, I need to tell you something. I've been diagnosed with heart disease. Advanced stage. The doctors are optimistic about treatment, but it's serious." The news hit harder than I expected. Despite everything that had happened, he was still my father. "What do you need?" I asked immediately. "Nothing. I just wanted you to know. And I wanted to say, I'm proud of you. Of what you built. I should have said that years ago. I should have recognized your value when it mattered. I'm sorry I didn't." We talked for an hour about his diagnosis, his treatment plan, his fears. It was the most honest conversation we'd had in years. When we hung up, I sat at my desk for a long time thinking about mortality and regret, about how life has a way of putting our priorities in perspective whether we're ready or not. I visited him in the hospital during his surgery and sat with him during recovery. We didn't talk much about business or the past. We talked about memories from when I was young, before companies and betrayals complicated everything. We talked about my mother, who'd passed away years before any of this started. We talked about life in present tense instead of past grievances. His recovery was slow but steady. The heart disease was manageable with treatment and lifestyle changes. While he healed, I thought about forgiveness and what it really meant. Forgiveness wasn't forgetting what happened or pretending it didn't hurt. It was choosing not to let past pain control present decisions. I forgave my father. Not because he deserved it or earned it through suffering, but because holding on to anger was exhausting and ultimately pointless. He'd made terrible choices. He'd hurt me deeply. But he'd also given me the push I needed to become more than I might have been otherwise. That didn't excuse his actions, but it added context that made forgiveness possible. When he was well enough to return to work, I offered him a different role, senior advisor with focus on mentoring and strategic planning. Not just contractor work, but a position that recognized his experience and contributions. He accepted with tears in his eyes. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for giving me another chance. For being bigger than my mistakes. I didn't do this for you, I said honestly. I did it because it's good for the company and because I'm done letting the past control my decisions. But Dad, this is your last chance. You report to Victoria, you follow established protocols, and you never, ever undermine my leadership. Clear? Crystal clear. You have my word. 8 years after starting Torres Caldwell Development, we'd grown beyond anything I'd imagined that day I walked out of my father's conference room. We had offices in 6 states. We employed over 200 people. Our annual revenue exceeded $300 million. We completed projects in 15 cities and had contracts lined up for 3 more years. But numbers only told part of the story. The real measure of what we'd built was in the neighborhoods we'd revitalized, the communities we'd served, the standards we'd set. Torres Caldwell projects were known for quality, sustainability, and positive community impact. We'd changed conversations about what responsible development looked like. I stood in our largest office, watching my team work on projects across the country, and felt something I hadn't felt in years, complete peace with where I was and how I got there. The anger was gone. The need to prove myself was gone. What remained was purpose and the satisfaction of doing work that mattered. Marcus and I got married that spring in a small ceremony attended by family, friends, and colleagues. My father walked me down the aisle, and while it felt bittersweet, it also felt right. We'd never fully recover what was lost, but we'd built something new from the ruins. That was enough. Aaron attended the wedding with his wife and children. We spoke briefly, polite, cordial, but distant. He seemed happy in his new life, and I was genuinely glad for him. His failure at Caldwell Industries had been my opportunity, but it had also freed him from expectations he couldn't meet. We'd both found better paths after everything fell apart. During the reception, my father gave a short speech. I made many mistakes as a father and as a businessman. But one thing I did right was raising a daughter strong enough to succeed despite my failures. Mia didn't just build a company, she built a legacy of innovation and integrity that will outlast all of us. I'm proud to call her my daughter, and I'm grateful she eventually forgave me for not seeing her clearly when it mattered most. Later, Victoria pulled me aside. How does it feel? Having everything you should have inherited, but on your terms instead of his. Honestly, it feels like I dodged a bullet. If Dad had given me Caldwell Industries back then, I would have been managing his legacy instead of creating mine. This way, everything I've built is genuinely mine. That's worth more than inheriting something I didn't create. She smiled. You know what the best part is? Younger women in this industry now have you as an example. They see what's possible when competence beats nepotism. That's your real legacy, not the buildings, but the path you cleared for others. 10 years after my father announced he was giving everything to Aaron, I stood at a different podium for a different announcement. Torres Caldwell Development was going public. The IPO would value our company at over $800 million, $200 million more than my father's company had ever been worth at its peak. The prospectus told our story in numbers and achievements, but the real story was in the journey. From betrayal to reinvention. From anger to purpose. From proving others wrong to proving myself right. Torres Caldwell wasn't just a successful company, it was proof that being underestimated could be the greatest gift someone could give you, as long as you were brave enough to use it. My father attended the announcement, sitting in the audience beside my husband and Malcolm. When I finished speaking and the applause died down, reporters crowded forward with their questions. One asked the question I'd heard variations of for years. How does it feel to surpass the company that once rejected you? I thought carefully about my answer. 10 years ago, I walked out of my father's company feeling betrayed and angry. Today, I'm grateful. That rejection forced me to build something better than I would have created otherwise. It taught me that my value isn't determined by other people's recognition. It's determined by what I choose to build when nobody's watching. After the press conference, my father approached me. You did it, he said simply. You built something extraordinary. We did it, I corrected, gesturing to Victoria, Malcolm, and the rest of my team. Nobody builds something this big alone. Still, he persisted. This is your creation. Your vision. I know I said it before, but I want to say it again. I'm sorry for not recognizing your worth when I should have. I'm sorry for choosing wrong. And I'm grateful you succeeded despite my failures, not because of them. I hugged him, something I hadn't done spontaneously in years. I forgive you, Dad. Finally, completely, I forgive you. Not because you earned it, but because holding on to anger was exhausting and ultimately pointless. You made mistakes. I grew from them. That's enough. As the celebration continued around us, I thought about the woman I'd been 10 years ago. Devastated by betrayal, furious at injustice, determined to prove everyone wrong. She'd served her purpose, driving me through those early days when anger was the only fuel I had. But I wasn't her anymore. I was someone who'd taken betrayal and transformed it into opportunity. Someone who'd built an empire not out of revenge, but out of vision and determination. Someone who'd proven that the best response to being underestimated wasn't anger, it was excellence. My father had given everything to my brother, thinking he was securing his legacy. Instead, he'd freed me to build something better. The Caldwell name would live on not through Aaron's inherited empire, but through my created one. And that empire would stand not because I'd wanted revenge, but because I'd wanted to build something that mattered. I looked around at the people celebrating my team, my family, my colleagues, my husband. This was success. Not the stock price or the revenue numbers or the industry awards. This. People I'd gathered, projects we'd completed, standards we'd set, changes we'd made. 10 years ago, my father shut me out of his empire. Today, I stood at the head of my own, built from nothing but determination and vision. The woman who'd walked out of that conference room had lost everything. The woman standing here now had gained something better: freedom, purpose, and the unshakable knowledge that her worth had never depended on his recognition. That was the real revenge. Not taking what he'd built, but building something better. Not proving him wrong, but proving myself right. Not letting his betrayal define me, but letting my response to it reveal who I really was. And who I was, it turned out, was someone who could turn betrayal into triumph, anger into ambition, and dismissal into destiny. The empire my father gave away was worth $600 million. The empire I built was worth $800 million and growing. But more than that, it was mine.